Welcome back to Inside Tennessee, along with my colleague John North. John Becker, yeah, it's magic.
TV magic.
TV magic. We are welcoming Administrator of Elections in Knox County, Chris Davis, to give us a big picture look at the ballot. We've handled a lot of races. John just interviewing the candidates for Commission District 3. But Chris Davis joining us to talk about a ballot that is chock full of races, and people need to either look at it beforehand or know it's going to take some time to work their way through it, Chris.
That's correct. Thank you for having me, first off. This ballot is probably the longest in an 8-year cycle, meaning that depending on where you live in Knox County, you're going to have between 58 to 61 different races on your ballot. And basically that consists of either a Republican primary or a Democratic primary for governor, or U.S. House, for State House, State Senate. All of the county races that we voted on in May in the primary will now be in the general. If you live in the town of Farragut, there are going to be some races there for mayor and alderman, as well as, of course, obviously the 5 school board races. And then on top of all of that, we have every 8 years what we call judicial retention elections. So there are 26 different Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, and Court of Criminal Appeals judges on the ballot. So all told, this ballot is going to be unique for us because now I guess this will be the 6th election that we have had since we went back to paper ballots in August of 20, and it'll be the first time, and hopefully the only time for a long time, where we actually have to give the voter 2 pieces of paper with races on both sides. So in essence, 4 sides, if you will, to complete. So it's going to take a little bit of time.
Chris, recognizing what you just said subtly and pleasantly about please pay attention to your ballot, because it's so long, I wonder if there isn't a danger that some people will just blow off parts of it and be like, I don't know, don't care.
That is a concern, and that happens every election. And truthfully, it doesn't matter if you have 5 races on the ballot, for instance, like a city election where maybe you've just got 5 city council districts. You're going to have a lot of people who will go in and vote for 1 person and be done, maybe 2 people and be done. We know that's going to be the case, but I do encourage people, maybe they're going in to look for 1 or 2 races, and I'm certainly not going to tell people how to vote or how they should vote, but I would encourage folks to do their homework, whether they go to our website or other resources on the internet, or to give us a call, and we can mail a sample ballot if we need to someone if they don't have internet access. I just really want the voters to take a minute or 2 and just be aware of what's on the ballot and where you can find it on the ballot, because obviously some things like, for instance, a mayor or a sheriff, they're going to be down that ballot just a little bit. If you're looking to maybe vote in the town of Farragut election, that's really going to be down the ballot quite a bit. So I just want folks to kind of have an idea of what to expect when they go into the polling place, so they're not totally surprised and taking 10 minutes plus, for instance, to fill out their ballot.
From a big picture perspective, Chris, let's talk about turnout. It's something we emphasize every election cycle. Typically in August, what is the turnout in Knox County for our viewers who haven't been paying attention to that?
Turnout's usually going to be between 50 to 80,000 for this election. I will tell you, 4 years ago, if you'll remember, we had an open governor seat, an open Senate seat, U.S. Senate, which is not even on the ballot this time, and an open U.S. House seat. And that, we had, I believe, 81,000 voters. Obviously, this time the governor's an incumbent, the House is an incumbent. There is no Senate race. So I do wonder maybe if that might lower turnout just a little bit, but it's typically one of those, you typically see more than you did in May, but you're generally going to see the turnout that you would for a November election, such as the one we'll have this year. But we're going to plan for that 75 to 80,000, thinking that it may be a little below that, but certainly I don't want to discourage anyone from coming out to vote. We've got 14 days of early voting like we always do. And so I encourage people to take advantage of it and do it early. Utilize those weekends as well, because one of the things that we see in our data are we have 3 Saturdays in this upcoming election, and normally we just have 2. But that Saturdays are a little lower turnout. So if you want to get in and be able to take your time and vote the ballot the way you want to, and free of feeling as though you're being rushed, certainly I would recommend voting on Saturdays. But it's one of those things. I think turnout was a little lower than I thought it would be in May, and so I'm thinking somewhere in that 50 to 60,000 range for August, but we'll see.
And again, just for some context for our viewers, 50 to 80,000. That's, by my calculation, anywhere from 17% to upwards of 30% of people who can vote do vote. Is that fair?
That's pretty accurate. Yeah, I mean, you look at, we have right around 295,000 active registered voters right now. I do think, given the run up to November and the gubernatorial election, I think we'll surpass, maybe for the first time in the history of Knox County, 300,000 registered voters sometime later this year. But with that 50 to 80, that's about 1 out of every 6, still 1 out of every not quite 4. So yeah, your numbers are probably about right. Yeah.
Chris, I've never known your political opinions. I would never ask you. It's none of my business. But I am curious. We hear the old saw from our dear friend Susan Richardson Williams that people sort of get to the first letter in the alphabet when they don't know what to do and they just check that one off. I'm wondering if you think that would be a factor as well in the voting. You just go for the, let's say, the candidate with the B letter as opposed to, say, the R, the S, or the T, if that makes any sense.
We do see that, and generally speaking, depending on which, and I'll use this term in air quotes, expert you talk to or whichever study you see, that could account for anywhere from 5 to 8% of the vote on, say a generic ballot, for instance, because as you know, under Tennessee law, if it's not a partisan race, meaning like our gubernatorial and U.S. House races this year, that type of thing in the primary, it just goes by the first letter of the last name. And so we do see that sometimes, but certainly I encourage people to read the entire ballot. I'll put it that way, John.
Any other specifics about this particular election you want to point out on, and then we'll get to some broader questions coming up in a few minutes. Chris?
No, I think the biggest thing I would stress, we always stress early voting, but particularly in this election where you're going to be handed 2 sheets of paper and it's going to take you a little bit of time to fill out the ballot, even if you go in knowing what you want to vote for in every race. I really do encourage early voting. We have 3 Saturdays because this election, unlike most elections, is on a Thursday, and that sometimes throws people off. Sometimes election day is Thursday, August the 4th, not a Tuesday. But we have 3 Saturdays of early voting. We're going to be going from 10 until 3. And so what we have seen in our data is we're opening up a little bit earlier and closing a little bit earlier on the weekends, because generally what our data showed us, and we really saw this in May, was people want to get out on Saturday morning and get voting over with, the people who do come out and vote. And then that mid-late afternoon is very, very slow for us. So I encourage people to take advantage of early voting, and particularly those weekends, because that really seems to be a time where you can get in and take your time and not feel rushed.
And Chris, if memory serves, in May, voters did listen to you. We saw more people early vote than we did on voting day, correct?
That is correct, and that's the case in most elections. We can get as high as 76, 77% in a presidential election. Conversely, in a presidential primary, you may see only 1/3 of voters vote early because they're waiting to see in those presidential primaries, if you're familiar, maybe who drops out of the race before they go to cast their ballot. So you're probably talking a 2-to-1 election day in those type instances. But we promote early voting. We almost always have over 50% of our folks early vote. And really, from an administrative perspective, it's just so much easier. And frankly, from the voters' perspective, I think it's much easier because you can get in and out quicker. You've got workers who have been doing this now. They work 14 days in early voting, so by day 2, by day 3, they've got it down. Whereas election day, as I've talked about before, these are folks who literally work 2 to 3 days a year. And so I just want to make sure that everything's smooth. And so I encourage people really to take advantage of early voting. And generally speaking, the majority of our voters do.
Chris Davis, we'll ask you to hang with us. We'll be back with more of our conversation right after this.